Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for this webinar today, brought to you by Innovate Hawaii, part of the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation. My name is Ellen, and I'm the Economic Development Specialist here at HTDC. Before we dive into the content today, I just want to remind everyone that the session will be recorded, so don't worry if you have to drop off halfway. It will be sent to your email address that you registered the event with. You're also welcome to send in your questions during the session through the the Q&A function, and we'll address it when appropriate or during the Q&A portion of this webinar. For those who are joining us today for the first time, and because you missed yesterday's session, the recording should have been sent to your email. So, if you didn't receive it, please let us know, or you can actually visit our website, and it should be uploaded there, where you can actually rewatch it as well. So we will leave the link to the website in the chat box later. So once again, today we have the awesome team from Hidden Gears here with us to share how you as a business owner should be preparing your e-commerce website for the holiday sales season. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Paolo and Ekami. Hey guys.
Hi
there. Screen share. Okay, I'm gonna let you take over just like we did yesterday.
Sure. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining. I think I see in the participants some folks who were in yesterday's session. And for those of you who are just joining us today, we're Hidden Gears. We are a Shopify e-commerce agency that focuses on design, development, and digital marketing. Yesterday, we spoke about some of the initial e-commerce tactics you could use to get your store ready for the holiday season. We talked about general goals, what to offer, what to work towards, what should change on the site, what your the different pros and cons, the types of offers you could do, and email marketing. So today we're actually going to talk about ads, organic search and social, and a bit of competitive analysis so that you can leverage all those channels this season. So Paolo's going to start with ads. I'll come back in for the organic search portion, and I'll let him take it from here. Thanks.
All right, so the holiday season is always time when you want to get in front of new folks and find new customers. And a lot of times as a small business, the best way to do that is to put out digital ads into the world and see if you can find the right match of folks who would be your prospective customers. So what I'm going to try to go through today is the general landscape, copywriting, Facebook and Instagram, different Google channels, and give you an overview of sort of what's going on and what's happened lately. The digital ad space changes all the time. If you are doing your own research, I always tell folks to check the date of whatever you're reading, because if it's more than 6 months old, it's probably if not obsolete, at least different or potentially just completely changed. So the big thing this year to be aware of as you're thinking about the level of investment and effectiveness of the ads that you might run is that social media ads have shifted a ton. Basically, the entire landscape, the entire game has changed. You may have heard of the Apple iOS 14 privacy changes. What this basically allowed folks to do is just to say, hey, I don't want any ad tracking basically whatsoever. Toggle the switch, and then Facebook, Instagram, and other app-based companies that rely on collecting data about people, correlating that versus various databases, and then monetizing that via ads, that's been shut off to basically a trickle. So as a result, there's been a lot of repercussions of that, and we'll talk about that shortly. But it's also driven up costs, and it's driven down effectiveness overall. As a result, what we've seen at a sort of macro level is that Google Shopping is going to be much more important for you being an e-commerce store. And if you haven't done it, it's probably time to set it up because we're seeing a lot of folks shift spend from Facebook and Instagram over to Google. It is a bit technical and is complex, and it's not something we really get into today, but I'll hopefully walk you through the main points and what to be aware of as you go down this slope. First of all, Great ads come with great copywriting and vice versa. So when we're thinking about Black Friday, Cyber Monday specifically, we want to make sure that we are really clear about what's on offer. If it's your biggest sale of the year, certainly mention it's the biggest sale of the year. We want a sense of immediacy and some amount of urgency. We want to be clear about when things start and end. So if there is a time limit, let's mention ends Friday, ends Sunday at midnight, etc. Be specific, because if you aren't specific, especially about time zone and so forth, you'll have people who maybe are in different time zones ordering from you. You said, oh, you said the sale is going to end Sunday and it's still Sunday here, or it's not Sunday anymore there, etc. You get confusion with that. So be really specific. You also may want to consider sort of running a separate set of ads and copy and having something in the hopper drafted up, ready to go, so that if you are running any ads that have a text basis, you can message a sort of ending soon sense of urgency, which says, you know, today's the last day, or tomorrow's the last day, or this weekend only, or so on and so forth. So people know exactly how much time they have to act, and therefore they're going to be more likely to act now. I also want to encourage you to think about tone. You know, in general, does it match your brand? Is it cheerful? Is it playful? Is it smart? Is it funny? Humor is something that's great if you can pull it off, but it's really hard to actually be objectively funny. So definitely think about what kind of tone you're setting and to what extent you're using that language to convey the positivity of your message, anything that's seasonally appropriate. You want to keep things, you know, light and positive. And this is, even if it is a major sale, maybe there is some amount of stress on your end in terms of making it work, make sure that whatever comes to the forefront is positive. And then also don't forget your value proposition. So just because there's a sale doesn't mean you shouldn't also say why your brand, why your products, what's great about them. The messaging does not have to be sale, 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 and that's it. You can also still weave in why the products that you have are great, and then emphasize the price as part of that, but not as the sole message. A lot of times I'll see Black Friday ads or sale ads in general that don't even mention what the product is, what the type of product is, nothing about the product or service. So I'll see an ad and it just says a brand I've never heard of, a photo that I don't really understand. Is it the clothes on the product? Is it the thing on the table? Is that the product? What's the product? It just says, you know, Black Friday sale starts now, blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's no reason for me to click on that, because if I don't know your brand, I don't know what I'm supposed to be you know, what's the context. So don't forget, just say sale, sale, sale. We want to say, this is what we have, this is why we're awesome, this is, you know, our core focus, and then move into sale messaging. And additionally, just want to underscore that, you know, there's a difference, and there's a sort of maybe a fine line between excitement and annoyance. We don't want to be too over the top to the point where it's cloying, or it seems, you know, just to the point where the messaging is really too strong. Not a lot of, you know, you don't want to use a lot of exclamation points. You don't want to appear like this is really the only thing that's happening right now. You need to have a sort of underscored, understated tone that should match the brand, unless you are already a very, you know, over the top and excited brand. You don't want to be too bouncy and too, you know, again, pushing the sale in and of itself. There needs to be a balance in that messaging as well. So speaking of Facebook and Instagram, as we mentioned, the change to iOS 14 happened in late April. As ad managers, we saw significant repercussions of this starting in late May. And by now, if you have been running ads, you've probably seen that your ads are doing a lot worse than they had previously, which means fewer conversions, but still higher costs. What we're seeing is that this has traditionally or in the last few months been especially true of Instagram. And this is because the ad tracking changes that Apple made are in iOS. So it's on iPad and iPhone and so forth, not on desktop, and obviously not on Android. But the more users you have that are mobile devices and iOS mobile devices, the more opaque the tracking and the data is, and the less that's available. So we've seen that Facebook, because it still has people who use Facebook on a desktop browser versus just on the mobile device, although it's still a vast majority of using mobile, has had a little bit better costing and a little bit better performance than Instagram. But right now, Facebook doesn't really have a solution for this issue. They're trying to push Facebook and Instagram shops really heavily, because if you still transact on the platform, then you will continue to give them that data because they'll be able to get the transaction end to end. Whereas if you're on the app and then you go to a website, that's where their connection breaks. So you've probably gotten bombarded with Facebook and Instagram reps saying, hey, why don't you hook up stores or shops? Hey, we're going to incentivize shops. Hey, here are the new rules. Here's the new connections. Here's the new sync. There's been a lot of changes because they're really trying to keep people buying on the platform. The issue with that is that then people aren't going to your website, and you have to maintain multiple things. And there's also different ways that Facebook is laying down the law in terms of how Facebook shops can work. We got an email this week saying that basically for Shopify connected Facebook shops, they're now releasing the order for shipment without marking it as paid, which is completely the opposite of the way most fulfillment warehouses work. And so you have to make a decision if you're using Facebook shops. Hey, is this something I need to jump through hoops to comply with, or is this something I want to opt out of? And that's something that's, again, it's an evolving landscape. We don't know yet. We'll see how this holiday goes, but Facebook is trying to claw back their data. What this really means in practical terms is that Facebook can't closely affiliate behavior and demographic attributes with users anymore. So it used to be you could go into Facebook and you could say, hey, I want to put an ad in front of everyone who makes more than $70,000, who's within 2 miles of Honolulu, who has a dog, they're a parent of a child who's 0 to 3 years old, they're interested in Tiffany jewelry, they also read this kind of books, they also might have this job title, and on and on and on until you can get a very specific audience. That's basically blown out the window. That doesn't exist anymore. So you can still add attributes to your Facebook campaigns to help target, but Facebook now says, this is a suggestion from you that we'll take into consideration, but we're just going to go out and find people that we think are right. And the way it does this is through machine learning. And machine learning takes two things to work well. One is time and the other is money. So machine learning means that they have to send out all these different signals, all these different settings, all these different ads, and see how they do over a period of time, while spending your money, of course, during that time. And then that computer model can learn and say, oh, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work, but this worked, let's change, and then do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And what that means is that previously, if you didn't want to be in front of a certain audience because you knew that wasn't your core demographic, that wasn't your core customer, that wasn't your core base, you could sort of avoid advertising to those people. And because the ads were, in effect, more targeted. Because of the loss of this targeting means that you're going to have much more overlap with other advertisers, because despite your best efforts, you'll probably not be able to income bracket. Your age targeting may or may not work. Geographic targeting by and large does, because that's coming through your IP and your user location. So you can still geographically get in front of specific people, but anything else, job title, parental status, all that stuff is technically things that you can still set to a certain extent, but it's not something that Facebook knows anymore or can fully limit. And so what it means is, if you imagine yourself on a retail block with 10 stores, previously you had 10 different customer groups, personas, demographic, etc. And you could advertise and everyone could sort of stay in their lane. Now, because the matching is much fuzzier and much less accurate, you're going to end up bleeding over and competing with other advertisers, regardless of whether you intend to or not. As a result of that, you're going to spend more money. You cannot have micro-targeted campaigns that spend, let's say, less than $500 a month and have any positive effect to your website. So your expectations for what Facebook and Instagram can do for advertising, I would say as a sort of general rule should be about half of what you saw last year, or at least you're looking at the same result, will take double the cost. We're expecting monthly spends of a bare minimum to keep the algorithm going, to have enough data to flow in, to make a difference and go through those extraneous audiences and find folks who are actually relevant. It's going to be $2,000 or $3,000 per month during holiday. And that's absolute bare minimum. So as a small business, depending on your scale, that can be a lot of money or a little money. For a lot of people, it's a lot of money, and it's at least double of what you might have hoped to spend before. That's all bad news. I'm sorry, there's no really other way to say it. It's really dramatically affected the landscape of what's possible for social media targeting. It's a lot broader, and that means the broader it is, the more money you have to spend. The more spend you have, the more that's likely being wasted on folks who are just not likely to convert. We'll see in the next year or so if there's some other sort of miracles that Facebook can do to get around this. I do think, unfortunately, even though I think we all agree that privacy is good, this is actually making quality of ads worse because they're less targeted, and you're going to see more junk that just doesn't seem to be applied to you. And overall, it really does hurt small businesses. So Facebook being what it is, that's kind of where we're at the moment. I don't have a better rosier picture to paint for you, other than if you're going to invest, make sure you're at a high enough baseline and that you have enough volume to make it worth a shot. But it is going to be more of a shot in the dark than a sure thing. And this is across all industries. This is across all verticals. This is across all different scales, folks that we know and we work with. And this is just something that is the new model of how things are going to work. So for that, I will also say, in terms of best practices, if you are going to go forth and try this out, split your campaigns between Facebook and Instagram. By default, if you just go to set up an ad, Facebook will sort of check all the boxes and you have all the placements on both platforms. Split it out, and so you can track Facebook versus Instagram, because we've seen brands that have historically done really well on Instagram and really poorly on Facebook. Now, because of targeting, are doing much better on Facebook and much worse on Instagram, and the script has kind of flipped. So you also need to be paying attention to where within the Facebook realm is your ad money going. I just covered this slide a little bit. Other thing I'll mention is ad changes are actually now worse to do than better. In terms of optimization, it used to be that you could go and you could test a bunch of headlines in Facebook or Instagram, make a bunch of changes, saying, oh, this one worked, let's iterate from that, change, and keep copying and duplicating ads and dialing in exactly which one would be the best. Right now, because of the targeting changes, it's taking a lot longer, as we mentioned, for ads to take hold. And so changing them more frequently is actually worse for the algorithm. And this also has led to differing levels of delay for ad approvals. We've seen approvals take up to 48 hours now. So Facebook and Instagram is also no longer a good sort of solution for flash sales. If you're doing a 24-hour sale, a 48-hour sale, it's going to be very hard to get that ad up and running and approved, and then down again in any amount of time that's going to give you coverage for that sale. So again, think of it now, Facebook and Instagram is no longer the magic bullet. it's a long haul, and it's much more of an investment in time, and it's a higher risk. Previously, it was fairly easy to get fairly good results out of Facebook and Instagram, and now it is definitely something that is extremely nuanced and much more fickle and takes much longer to do. And I'll just note, this also applies to retargeting. So retargeting used to be on Facebook and Instagram, and generally understood be ads that were shown to people who had already been to your website. Now Facebook has announced, guess what? We're also going to include people who haven't visited your website, even though these ads are geared towards people who have. So you also have to be very careful about if you're adding any kind of promo or win back or exclusive. Since you've been here and you abandoned, now we're going to give you this deal. Those could go to new people now because Facebook just doesn't have enough people in its quiver to target. So you'll also see dramatic shifts in retargeting costs as well, unfortunately. So what's happened? A lot of times folks have now shifted their spend over to Google Shopping, because while it's also algorithmic based, it is really just product catalog ads, and it's trying to get the right product in front of the right person at the right time. And Google's been much better at targeting this because they haven't been reliant on app data to do so, which is now cut off by iOS 14. So this is an example I'm sure you've all seen of a product ad carousel from Google Shopping. You also notice this was for an organic search. This is the first search result, not ads, other ads, not organic results, not other listings. This is often the top spot if this is a commercial-based query. So for Google Shopping, the feed configuration is everything. So Google can either crawl your site and try to determine what your products are and where they go and automatically do it, or you can use a feed to sync into Google Merchant Center. There are a bunch of feed apps. If you're on Shopify, there's also a sort of built-in Google Shopping channel. And what that lets you do is it helps you step through and saying, here's all the products that are live on my site. Whenever I change them in the back end, whether that's they go out of stock, I change the photo, the description, sync that up, send that over to Google and say, hey, this has changed, and maintain that on a regular basis, at least once a day, etc. The feed apps offer a level of sort of nuanced control, which is often better if you have complicated products or if you have a lot of products and you need to make certain rules like, hey, we don't want these products to be in Google Shopping because they're custom, or they're really for this one audience, or the shipping is too expensive, we don't advertise those, right? Any kind of exceptions, handling, etc. The third-party feed apps are great at handling. The side bonus from this is that if you do hook up a feed to Google Merchant Center that then hooks up to Google Ads to run your shopping ads, Google will actually syndicate these products in what they're calling the organic shopping listings, which is basically free catalog placement. So as we saw previously, this is an example of paid placement, but lower down on the same search result page, you can see that there's a popular products kind of sidebar. This is fed by organic results. So IKEA here did not pay to put this placement here, even though it has a photo, metadata about the cost and the reviews all in the organic listings. That was all for free, but because they have their catalog hooked up. So it's actually sort of worth hooking up even if you don't initially run ads, because during the time from which you do the legwork to sync it up and get it going and get it linked, you will start getting some free results as part of that. We've also seen this get pretty high volume in terms of the SEO volume. So depending on the products that you have, you might actually get a good amount of free visibility from it. But that's sort of the side bonus in which that it lets you run Google Shopping ads themselves. Shopping ads can also have promo extensions. So during the FCM, you can say, hey, we have a coupon for X. You can plug that in and it'll show up with a special coupon code icon, again, to entice people who are browsing through catalog listings and say, oh, this one's on sale, or this one has free shipping, and so forth. There are some limitations. It has to be a fairly brief message, type of discount, etc. There's a few limits. So if you're doing a BOGO, it might not approve it and so forth. But if you're running a more traditional coupon, it'll likely work. Google now, though, will crawl your site and verify that promotion. Their bot will actually add things to your cart, go into your checkout, and start filling out fields to make sure that promo codes actually work. So you need to make sure too that if you are running these, you're very diligent about, again, those start and end dates, making sure you're not advertising something that no longer is running, vice versa. And what we're seeing and why we are seeing people move over to Google Shopping is that the sort of minimum threshold for some sort of success is generally lower. You really have to spend more than $500 a month on it, ideally more than $1,000 a month, because you need enough volume. You need Google to send out all the different tendrils and signals and see what comes back. And if you have a really low budget, let's say you have a $300 a month budget, that's $10 a day to spend. If you're spending $2 a click, you're getting 5 people a day to the site with this. It's not enough to sustain Google data models to learn what's actually working and to actually get enough precedence and enough priority to really figure out what's going on. Other than that, shopping campaigns don't have a lot of settings. So you'll set your category, you'll set which image you like to use by default, you'll double check the pricing, but you're not going to write copy. There's no copywriting other than what's in your description itself. And so it's a different type of ad in that you are not choosing a special image just for that. You're not choosing the landing page. All the traffic is going straight into your product pages. And you have less control over how that appears. However, nonetheless, in these times where we've seen ad shifts away from social, we've seen that become an important resource in folks still getting visibility and getting sales. So I'd really encourage you looking into that and getting that configured in the next couple of weeks if you don't already. Let's talk about Google search ads. So these you probably know from the search results, has a little tag that says it's an ad. You'll see extra extensions regarding order accuracy, reviews, deliverability, etc. Google has also changed a lot in the last year. So in terms of targeting, you used to be able to say, hey, I want this exact phrase to match, or this exact sentence to go with this ad if someone types that exact thing in. And we also had modified broad match, which meant, hey, these words can be in any order in a search, but they all have to be there in order for my ad to show up. That's gone. Google has basically fuzzy matched everything, and pretty much everything acts like broad now. An exact match acts more like phrase, but still they can be out of order. So even if you're setting an exact query, that's no longer the case. If you're noticing a trend, it's that the major ad platforms are taking away more and more features from the control of you, the advertiser, because more and more machine learning algorithms are coming into play where they say, just leave it to us, we know best, our bots will go out there and do their thing. Here's your options, take it or leave it. So there's a lot less control over search ads. As a result, you have to really still be very, very granular about how you're targeting, what your keywords are, etc., because it can still be effective, particularly if you're in a lower budget mode, because in the short term, with super niche queries with Google search, we know the intent of the shopper. We know more or less what they're typing in. And does that mean, hey, I'm doing research on a new television? I'm comparing two televisions, which means I'm done some research already, or I'm looking for a place to buy a specific thing. We know the different parts in the buying cycle, and we can actually match ads to that. So even with these changes, there can be ways that Google search can still be effective as well, especially if we're running for a shorter time. It takes less time to ramp up and get traction than it does for, let's say, the social algorithm right now. Responsive ads were previously an alternate format also coming into this year. Now Google's announced within the next year, this will be the only search ad type. And what that means is basically every ad you write will have at least 3 headline options, a whole bunch of tagline options, etc., where you're basically writing one ad that Google can rearrange and drag and drop the pieces of it in any order that it chooses, rather than saying, this is my headline, this is my copy, this is exactly what I want to say. So if we look at this example, Design Within Reach may have put modern candles and candle holders, but this was probably one of 3 headlines that they specified, and Google picked that one. In stock, exclusive, ready to ship, that could be one option. Authentic modern furniture accessories is another. The best in modern design, another. Authentic design, great deals, iconic designers, another. So if you look at this as one ad, it's actually likely one of the 3 headlines and maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 of 8 phrases that Google assembled based on who they thought I was when I searched for this and where it was and what the performance might be. So you have less minute control over search ad copy, but you're just going to have to say, here's the options, Google, go get them, and Google will make edits. You will also expect to have a high amount of overlap if you are running both search and shopping. So the same result could, the same query could trigger both a shopping ad and a search ad. If you're running both and you have, a product match for both, you could have, in theory, 2 ads running. Google is actually supposed to dedupe that. So it will choose whether for any given result that could trigger either one of your campaigns, it'll choose one of them. 9 times out of 10, it's going to choose the shopping ad. So if you do have lower visibility based on what you expected for a search ad, it may be because if you're running shopping, that those shopping ad queries are actually showing up and Google is then skipping your search ad and deferring it. That essentially gives you some more room to play with in terms of budget. If you notice that happening, saying, okay, well, these aren't triggering because we're actually covered over here in shopping, so let's shift that spend somewhere else. But in theory, you should not be double paying for any ad that matches both. You should just be getting one single placement for that. Again, I know that this is a lot to take in. The ad world has always been incredibly nuanced. There's a ton of detail, and it does change pretty regularly. What I tell folks who are just starting out is that you need to assume that whatever is turned on when you just go and make an ad and all the defaults are set and you press go, that's set up to make the ad companies as much money as possible. It's going to be as broad as possible. It's going to have every box ticked, and really the process of setting up ads, if you're doing it for the first time, is double checking your settings and saying, if I think this is only going to people in Hawaii, can I verify that, or is this actually going to also go to everyone in the United States? Who cool is this? If I think that I'm going to limit it to this range or this phrase, is that really going to be the case? And going through and double checking to see what your defaults are. There's a lot of blogs out there that cover this. There's different aspects where if you Google it, you can say, oh, that's what that setting is, etc. I encourage you to nerd out a little bit to explore and to figure out whether what you're turning on is actually something that's going to be viable. That being said, it is worth it to experiment. The only thing I will say is that if you're only going to experiment once a year, holidays are actually not necessarily the best time to do it. You do have much higher incidence of conversions because you likely have things on sale and people are in a shopping mood. However, you also have the highest competition of the year. And so if you only run ads in Q4 and then you go to run ads in Q1, what happened in Q4 may be no indication of what's going to happen in Q1. When other advertisers have dropped off, when there's different sales, there's different products, there's different seasonality. So just be careful about extrapolating your learnings if you do run ads during Q4 and during this time to make sure that you're not assuming that if you just run it, it's going to be like that all year. There's going to be very different behavior during this time. And when it's good, it might be higher converting, might be better click-through, et cetera, but there could also be much higher costs in most of the year, less competition, lower costs. So just be careful about how you make decisions during this time, because there's going to be some seasonal skew as well. So that, just wrapping up ads, there are, of course, other ad platforms. There's Reddit, there's Pinterest, there's TikTok, there's Etsy, there's Amazon if you're on those platforms. Again, is Q4 the best time to do it? If you feel confident that you're going to have a lot of traffic in the door and you have a really good sale, you can do it. Just be careful about that Q4 skew. And also know that the younger the ad platforms, the less options there's going to be in terms of targeting typically, or control or reporting. And so sometimes it's harder to figure out what's going on there. For these alternate platforms, if you're on them, I would say start small. Don't go big. Start with $500 or less budgets, and see how it goes and see what kind of value that gets you. There is an early adopter advantage, particularly for these alternate social platforms. There's going to be just less competition, less people trying it, less people doing it. That should mean that ultimately they could be more cost effective.
Okay. So shifting into organic search and social, just a quick definition of what we mean when we talk about that. Organic refers to any of the traffic that's really coming through to your site that isn't being, that they're finding on their own, basically. So if you're selling chocolate and they're Googling, gift chocolate for the holidays, and they happen to see your site in Google, and they come to you via that way. So that's what that means. So there are techniques that we use, which is called search engine optimization, where there's a research of what phrases are getting the most volume and apply to your site. That content, those phrases are then included in your pages, how you talk about your products, and sometimes can seed, ideas for blog content. So, for example, if you are selling, a good example locally is the Ulu Cooperative. They sell breadfruit and co-crops. They also have a lot of educational content on their e-commerce site that is directed towards how to prepare ulu, peeled ulu, cooked ulu, recipes for ulu, what have you. So you can kind of see how that content is more of a longer term, higher effort, but ultimately valuable way to get additional traffic to your site. And for holiday, you might already have a blog in place, in which case you might have a plan for your content calendar. It's always going to be a more promotional time, but occasionally just people can get kind of exhausted of the constant, sale language, product language. It's kind of alleviates sort of and freshens up your marketing. If you can work in something that's just interesting to read or timely, or it's not have an immediate shop, call to action, but you still want to keep the conversation going with your customers. So think about what articles you might be able to pull together for the holiday. Very popular one that we do often see with clients are gift guides, especially gift guides 2021, having the date in there is something that will just, the recency is more attractive to search because it feels more timely and more current. So it's also just a good time to look at that storytelling engine as an additional support system for your site as you're going into holiday. You can also use it to just sell the products in a more long form, wordy way. If your product requires explanation, if your product is better sold with, sort of a situation that you create, use that copy to do a bit of storytelling, especially for your returning customers for that are maybe on email who are more invested in digging down into it. And then similarly, as we have social media, we have ads through social media, which Paolo mentioned, and then we also have organic social media, which is your day-to-day posts that are not part of your advertising campaigns. Yesterday we had someone who asked a question about, should they email out advance notice of a sale starting before it's begun? We recommended not to, because we want to keep that email list engaged and action oriented and not unsubscribing to what they might feel is unnecessary emails leading up to it. So that kind of messaging is great to keep on your social media profiles and just, have a lot of, like little notes, little brand touch points throughout your feed. That could be teaser posts about the upcoming sale, regular just posting throughout the sale period, featuring perhaps some of the backstory of the products that you have. If it's a local business, buying local, selling local, that kind of thing. Sale ending soon notifications, and then Instagram stories are a really great way to get, more visibility into someone's feed. It lets you just highlight a little bit of motion or video if you can. One feature that I really love on Instagram stories is like the poll feature. I've seen a lot of local companies use that as sort of like customer research, a quick way to do that. Like, do you like this style or do you like this style? Would you give this or give that? And it has an interactive component. So I think don't, ignore all of these sort of organic methods of marketing leading into holiday. You probably won't get, the bulk of direct conversion or sales through it, but it's part of the sort of omni-channel approach of making your brand consistent and top of mind. And then lastly, competitive analysis. This just refers to the practice of keeping an eye on who else is in your space, how other companies are approaching the season and approaching holiday promotions and what they're offering. Not so much that you can like feel that you need to compare yourself to them necessarily in a bad way, or that, you need to do everything they're doing. But as e-commerce has really taken over sort of how we shop, there are different trends year to year. This year, it'll definitely be characterized by a sort of a post-COVID, supply chain service sort of mindset. I think we're seeing a lot of companies who are really being proactive with doing the sale early, trying to offer more generous shipping, more generous returns. In turn, customers are more empathetic to those challenges as well. So we have noticed that, for example, this year, it's a good idea to just get on the email list of any companies that you feel are direct competitors, or any companies you just admire, how they present themselves, so that you can understand how they merchandise and message. You might see people discounting much earlier this year. You might see people doing free shipping for a period of time, doing digital gift cards after the shipping cutoff ends, doing gift wrapping. It's really just kind of like a university of e-commerce techniques out there once you get going. And again, with the time-sensitive nature of the holiday, it's not something where we recommend doing like a whole overhaul based on this so soon. But just consider what that could do. Keep notes on what the other companies are offering, and have a pulse of what's going on outside of your own company, since we all know, like, as business owners, you can get very into the day-to-day, so that you are truly competitive with a shopper who might be comparing products from your site to another's. So what is the strategy overall? We touched on this yesterday. First, there's not really one answer. Every business is different. You need to be multifaceted and engaged in many different points in the buying cycle, and learn from what your customers, already like and are doing, using the different channels we've discussed.
Yeah, and I hate it to be a cop-out, but that really is, you have to wear a lot of hats, you have to juggle a lot of things, and your attention will definitely be divided, and it's a challenge. But the core objective is to know your goals, split them out by category, and make a hit list, and then delegate what you can within your team. There's certainly a lot to get done, but when you cover all your bases, you do much better than if you say, I just don't have time for this one, or I don't have time for that one. We really see that in a multi-device world, people are coming to your website, maybe first on a phone, later on a desktop, twice on a phone, 3 times on one for the other. People are engaging and thinking and considering their purchases, and it's not just a show up once and check out situation. You really need to have visibility in different places to be truly effective and have a much more holistic plan. And you just know that this year's going to be hard. We want it to be easier after last year. It's going to take a lot of focus. But the good news is we're seeing with some folks that because people have been traveling less, they're spending a little more on luxury goods and discretionary income items. There might be some nostalgia for travel for people who've been to Hawaii and then love it, and you have to have a Hawaii-based product. There's going to be some pull and be like, well, we can't go this year, we couldn't go this year, but maybe let's get our favorite treats or our favorite items from there and connect with a place that they miss. And that's certainly an advantage as well. So now I think we'll wrap and do a little Q&A. Anybody has questions?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A yet, but there was one that kind of came up, not during your session, but I was talking to a manufacturer yesterday, and they were asking, if it is actually okay for them to use old inventory as part of their giveaway or promotional campaigns for the holidays. What do you guys think about that? Like old inventory, things that they will not be continuing to produce anymore. They just want to get rid of it.
Yeah, I think that they can definitely do that. And actually there's probably like, depending on what the item is, if it's not something they're going to be continuing to produce, but it was liked, it was bought, that's actually sort of a sense of urgency that I would use as a marketing message and say, get it before they're gone forever. This is our last run, or, kind of a message that it is a sort of a special one-time offer. I think a lot about marketing is really how it is sometimes challenging as the manufacturers to really see something we've been doing and put a new spin on it or look at it through the eyes of a consumer. But they may not know that it is old, first of all, and they may not know that they couldn't just get it anytime, because I think the mentality with e-commerce is like, oh, everything's available to me, instant gratification. So we do see a lot of success with manufacturers who pivot towards bringing in more of that, like, no, this is actually a limited edition. This is only going to run for a certain period of time, and add that like special factor back into it.
Yeah, there's a scarcity factor too. You could play up that this is, we saved this last batch, etc. Obviously, if there's any like major branding, packaging, etc. shifts where it's going to look significantly different, you should probably note somewhere that this is non-returnable, or it's like this is what it is. But yeah, certainly, it's great to do a closeout with as a benefit to your audience, if that's possible.
Yeah.
I see a question about granularity of Google search ads. What that means is in Google ads campaigns for search, you can make a campaign, and then you can make an ad group, and then within the group there are keywords and there are ads. And so there's a sort of 3-level structure. You could just make a campaign and essentially have everything in one group and toss a bunch of ads in there, but it's not going to really be focused. So with Google search ads, since we basically know what exactly someone is searching for, if you have a large product line or you have a bunch of different types of products in your catalog, you want to make sure that, if we are, let's say, Nordstrom, we don't have one campaign saying, hey, clothing campaign, and that's it, and we just have a bunch of ads and a bunch of keywords and it covers all the bases. We want to say there's groups for men's shoes, there's groups for women's shoes, there's groups for men's t-shirts versus men's pants versus this versus that. So otherwise you're going to try to write an ad that's going to cover what you're selling in all these different ways, which doesn't necessarily make sense, because then someone could see a message that doesn't actually match what they're searching for. Google doesn't really enforce any of that granularity or that structure. That's just sort of a best practice, is to make sure that particularly the wider the type of product catalog you have, make sure that you're splitting budgets, you're splitting groups, you're splitting those things out so they don't actually directly overlap with each other, because you want your ads to actually reflect as closely as possible in the copy with what you have. And that'll just be more effective, save money, etc.
So I think I don't see another question, but one that I had was, with all the holiday craziness and a lot of the sales messaging going out there during this period, what would you recommend for starting a new year, right? What do they have to kind of prepare for in terms of messaging, if that makes sense? Because everything is just like buy, right? Is there a way to like kind of close it out in a nice way, just to establish that sort of, customer connection beyond just buy?
Yeah, I think one of the actual upsides of Black Friday happening earlier is that the, sort of Christmas to New Year's timeframe is a lot quieter for everybody, for people who work in e-commerce, for you, the manufacturers, and for customers. And we've noticed that there's just been a lot more, of a general quieting of marketing messages after Christmas, and then
or even after shipping cutoffs.
After shipping cutoffs, which I think is a good thing. And most of our companies either don't, really promote much during that time, or they will do content around sort of, a holiday message, a family message, thankfulness, clean slate. What's ahead for us in the new year? Like, maybe depending on your brand or your tone you're sharing with your customers, here's some of the things that we're ready to release and you should look forward to. But it's generally a quieter time with most e-commerce businesses where they're more in the phase of planning, what their marketing calendar will look like in the busier months.
Yeah, and we've seen also a lot more kind of personal messaging from brands that used to be fairly buttoned up or fairly kind of generic, where the founders have come out and really said, here's the challenges we've had over the last year, and like just being a lot more transparent and a lot more kind of human and trying to get a resonance with people. So I would say also during that time, don't be afraid to be more personal and really show who's behind your company and who they are. And it doesn't have to have any sales goal. It's just really a connection and appreciating customers as well. Question from Anissa about, would you suggest making a gift guide landing page on a website, like business name, gift guide 2021, or as a number of products would be good to have? So gift guides could be a couple different angles. There could be a gift guide if you have a large catalog of the products that you just have and what you recommend and why, and saying so curating your own catalog. And then there's also a gift guide you could do to help promote sort of partner brands or brands you admire and like, and actually include other people's sort of products and link to them. And that can also be a starting point for a relationship, like we were talking about yesterday with partnering on giveaways and so on and so forth. You can reach out and say, hey, we include you in this gift guide. We really admire your brand, blah, blah, blah. And that's, again, it's like a B2B relationship thing as well. It's a little late in terms of like a third-party gift guide 2021 posting in terms of the SEO traction, but we wouldn't say like business name gift guide. It would more be like a category, like, best gifts for, X type of person, or the best, gear for X. It's going to be a fairly specific. If you're thinking the buyer persona, what are the types of gift guides that are out there? They're directed for like someone who's searching for a gift for a specific type of person in their life, or someone who's searching for gifts with a kind of curation, like, could be fly fishing, could be, people who are into quilting, it could be these sort of different interests. So if you do have something that aligns with your business and one of those interests, then it's just a question of, is it from my own products or some of ours, and then it's other people's or not? But I would jump on that soon because it will take time for that to get indexed and so forth. A couple questions. One from Kat, could we speak more about SEO these days? Sure. The changes that we've all talked about in terms of ads have not been as extreme on the sort of organic search front. There has certainly been some changes here and there. One of those is Google is starting to push site speed and sort of more on-site evaluations. There's been some changes to title tags that have come out. Really, if you're interested, I would read Search Engine Land and Search Engine Journal are two sort of blog type journalistic publications that are really tracking a lot of changes and have a lot of articles about sort of what's what these days. Overall, Google is looking for quality over quantity, and they're looking for things that are contextually relevant across the products that you have. And for e-commerce, in a nutshell, Google doesn't particularly like products because Google likes showing people products when Google knows that someone's trying to buy something. But for a more top of funnel general result, something in the research phase, Google doesn't like just dumping people on product pages. If you're searching, where to buy X, like you're going to see product pages there. But if you're searching, what refrigerator should I buy, you're not going to see a lot of direct product pages. You might see shopping ads. You're going to see review sites and blogs and stuff of that nature. So just consider, if you can, and you have the capacity, adding non-product content to your e-commerce site, because that's really what's going to give Google enough to chew on to consider you for placement for non-bottom of funnel sort of shop only terms. And I think we have a minute or two to answer Randy, who's asked, is there an example of a company you know that has a great marketing campaign?
Definitely companies come to mind that we think their marketing is excellent. We haven't seen yet this year like too much holiday specific marketing yet. But one example, I think it was Aloha's. It's not a local company. It's an apparel company that is sustainable. Did sort of an anti-Black Friday announcement weeks ago saying we're a sustainable company. We don't produce product just for like a short period of time. It's sort of an anti-fast fashion thing. So we're discounting now so that we can help you not feel the crunch of the holiday. And I think those contrarian messages really stand out for me. Anytime a brand is really confident in just their values. So I would say that they're pretty interesting in terms of a holiday example. There's a company we work with called Material Kitchen. They make beautiful home goods. They recently redid their website for their holiday. It's an Asian women-run company. They last year for COVID did a partial donation to local organizations in New York who are helping elders, get access to food, and there's a charitable component that was super well done. And then I think just in general, Paolo recently bought. Did you buy something from Mack Weldon?
I bought from recently, just for my own use, Mack Weldon and Harry's. Harry's is like a razor product that's in Target, and you'll see it around. But they just have very cohesive messaging, and more than the message itself, I just felt like I was swept into something that just connected all the dots. Harry's uses some hand-drawn animation and some things that are just, objectively just very visually pleasing, but there's a tone, and it's you get a sense of familiarity. You have a sense of a little bit of humor. You have a sense of character, and I would say that it's really consistent. So it wasn't, from an order confirmation to a, hey, your order is being shipped, to, hey, you got it, is there anything we can do? There's nothing that felt generic or out of place. And just consistency from end to end is really something that makes you feel like you're part of something, rather than oh, I got this, I got that, and you're in a couple of different places with them, with the brand. Quick question about smaller local or Hawaii companies. Asado family is a good example. They're doing really great, organic social marketing, and they're doing flash sales on social media and things of that nature. They have a really consistent tone, and they have their own vibe, you can tell, just by going to their web presence as well. And then we have one more question about YouTube, which I don't know we have 100% time for, but YouTube is its own realm. There are YouTube ads, of course. There's YouTube influencers, or you can try to get product placement. You could have your own YouTube channel, etc. A lot of people aren't really equipped to do video because it's hard. You have to talk in the camera, there's persona, there's editing, it's just a ton of work. If that's in your wheelhouse, by all means, go for it. YouTube, a lot of people consider YouTube a search engine in and of itself, because again, for certain types of queries, people go see if they can learn something, and if they're a visual learner, YouTube is a great way to do that. So if you do have these top of funnel queries, or you want to do a product walkthrough or a visualization, or you want to do a little Q&A, what are my top questions about this, etc., and you have the ability and comfort to get in front of camera and do that, by all means do that. It can definitely be valuable, and it's just another way that people can find a way to your door.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So we have come to the end of the session today. Just a couple of reminders. Oh yeah, and then there's Paolo and Ekami's contact details if you want to reach out to them with more questions. Don't forget, we have another webinar on November 3rd on data privacy and practices. So if you're in e-commerce and digital marketing, you need to learn how to manage customer data properly as the business owner. So definitely join us for that. In our post-event recap email, we'll send out the links for you to RSVP as well. Also for the people listening in, if you are a manufacturer or small medium business owner going into e-commerce or digital marketing, we do have an upcoming cohort starting early next year. Paolo and Ekami will be part of that cohort as well. So if you really enjoyed their presentation today, definitely sign up for updates to learn more about the cohorts starting January 2022. So without further ado, thank you so much, Paolo, Ekami, for your time today, for teaching us.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Bye.